today for the Free My Future Summit that has been generously hosted by NextGen. I'm Natalia Abrams. I am the director at Student Debt Crisis, and we are joined today by a wonderful panel, and we are all here to help you with your student loans. If you have questions, please enter them in the YouTube chat. We have folks from everyone from our teams standing by to help you answer your questions, and we'll be trying to take some of the Q&A during this workshop. So with that, let's introduce our great panel. So from my team, I have Cody Houdanian. Cody, why don't you tell us about the organization?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is Cody Houdanian. I'm the program director at Student Debt Crisis. Tonight, we are going to be hosting in partnership with NextGen Policy and our friends at Savi, one of our student loan help clinics or workshops. We've hosted these for years, and they've become even more important during the pandemic. We have about 2 million supporters across the country. Many of them need really important student loan information to make sure that they can weather this really difficult time. So I'm happy to have you all here and honored to be able to be a part of the Free My Future Summit as well.
Great, thank you so much, Cody. And also today we have Samantha Singh with NextGen Policy. Sam, do we have you here?
Yes, thanks, Natalia. And thank you everyone for joining in tonight. I'm Samantha Singh, Policy Advisor at NextGen Policy. We're a nonprofit political advocacy organization, and we work on a wide range of economic and social justice issues, which definitely includes tackling the student debt crisis. And so we do this work through primarily California legislative efforts and programmatic efforts as well. But we're looking to be helpful in any space that we can be, and the summit is definitely one of these venues for that. So hopefully you all have enjoyed it and will get a lot out of tonight's workshop. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you so much for this summit and bringing us all together to talk about this really very important topic. And last but certainly not least, we have Lindsay Clark, Director of External Affairs over at Savi. Lindsay, do we have you here?
Yes, you do. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thanks, Natalia. It's great to be here. As Natalia said, my name is Lindsay Clark. I'm with Savi. We are a social impact tech startup based in Washington, D.C., and we're trying to help borrowers navigate the complicated repayment and forgiveness programs and get from start to finish and enroll and see that relief. So we've been working with the team at Student Debt Crisis and NextGen for a while and helping borrowers. We had our office hours today, and it was such a great, sort of experience being able to talk one-on-one with so many people and get them the help they needed. So really looking forward to talking with you all tonight, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. With that, we can move on to the next slide. So just a little bit about today's clinic. This is part of the second annual Free My Future Student Loan Summit. We did this last year in person. It's been great to do this virtually and bring this to a broader audience. Over today's clinic, we're going to teach you about some tricks for those of you in college and kind of paying for college, but more importantly, we're going to focus on student loan basics, affordable repayment options when you graduate, if you're still in school, and forgiveness programs if you're looking to go into public service jobs, what benefits there are for you there. One important thing to note is that we're not financial counselors or credit counselors or affiliated with the Department of Education. We are student loan borrowers and supporters trying to help you out with your student loans and bring you valuable tools and resources that hopefully you've been told about, but many borrowers haven't. And for a lot of you, that have been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, we're going to bring you the most recent policy updates and how the grassroots movement and nonprofits alike are working hard to end the student debt crisis and how you can get involved. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Sam Singh to discuss the kind of overall snapshot that borrowers are facing today.
Yes, thank you, Natalia. And as she just said, we do want to start off recognizing the student loan debt is a significant burden, and unfortunately, a lot of you're not alone. So there are 45 million Americans with student loan debt, and that comes to a total of $1.7 trillion nationwide. Of those borrowers, 8 million are currently behind on their loans, and the average borrower has $37,172 in debt. And in the next slide, we also know that this debt is disproportionately carried by some communities more than others. Unfortunately, 2/3 of all that student debt is owned by women. And then especially for Black women, more than 56% carry student debt. Latinx communities are also hard hit, and Black borrowers are often the ones that are falling behind on student debt payment. So this is a crisis that is widespread and crosses into many different communities. And in the next slide, we know that the burden of student loan debt has a domino effect, and it's really an overwhelming amount of debt that is coming into an economic crisis, a civil rights issue, and it's going to have larger societal impact as everyone's struggling to get to the day-to-day expenses. So its impact on wealth, we know the average 30-year-old borrower has $8,000 less in wealth because of student debt, and Black borrowers are $10,000 in the red. We know that student debt prevents buying a car or home, and so for more than half of first-time home buyers, they found that saving for a down payment was difficult because of their student debt. And especially now, Latinx borrowers are more prone to unemployment because of the current pandemic and economic crisis. And so we're gonna now move on to the next part of the workshop. And again, we do want to state that it's important to go over these numbers because, we just want folks to know that you're not alone and it's not just you. It's pretty common to be someone with student debt than it is to not have it. So in this section, we're going to be, hopefully it's going to be a quick refresher for a lot of you college students that are tuning in, but we do want to go over this because I know for myself, I'm a first-generation college student, and some of this information I didn't even know when I was in high school or college. So the next slide. We do want to make sure that despite how hard it is getting, don't worry, we assure you and trust us, college is absolutely worth it. Stick with it. It's going to get harder, but it's totally worth it. We know that college graduates are expected to make twice as much in a lifetime compared to those with just a high school graduate degree. Twice as many job opportunities are going to open up for you, and employment rates with the degree holder is nearly half of that for high school graduates. So you may just stick to it. College is absolutely worth it. We don't want to make this seem overwhelming, and just encourage you to continue with your college experience. And hopefully the information here will help make that easier to navigate. So going over, again, hopefully when I was applying for college, I didn't know the differences between public and private colleges. So, hopefully, again, this is information you will be using as a refresher, but for first-generation students or those who didn't have someone in their life, this will be helpful. So public colleges generally include their four-year public colleges and universities, and community colleges. Typically, they're more affordable, and they have publicly funded grants and scholarships. For private colleges, there are also four-year private colleges and for-profit schools as well as nonprofit private schools. And these private colleges have large endowments that can subsidize tuition. We do want to warn you that there's some predatory schools out there, for-profit colleges, that leave students with more debt and less valuable degrees. Let's see, sorry, we can go back to the previous slide. I just want to mention for our California residents, these public colleges then are like our UCs, CSUs, and community colleges. And so if you're in California, again, in private colleges, these are like Stanford and USC. All right, now we can go next slide. So paying for college. There's lots of resources to help get you some information about your options for paying for college. You know, if you're in high school, that looks like a counselor that's there. Maybe if you have an AVID program. And if you're in college, you know, get to know your financial aid officers very closely. Go and bug them all the time. They're there. They have the actual information you're going to need. And so for when we talk about what types of funding sources there are, there's financial aid, scholarships, and grants. Those are all free money that you won't have to pay back. So those are the best types to go after and exhaust first. And your key to all of these funding sources is FAFSA. You need to complete a FAFSA when you're about to apply for college and every year that you're in college so you can get that federal and state level aid. All right, next slide. And for our undocumented students that you're out there, you know, please continue the hard work. It's going to be worth it as well. The cost of tuition in some states for undocumented students, you are eligible for some state programs. Unfortunately, you're not going to be eligible for federal or Pell Grants programs, but in some private colleges, there are limited programs there for offering aid to undocumented students. If you're watching from across the nation, generally, if you have a social security number, you do complete the FAFSA form itself. However, if you don't have a social security number, please be sure to check out your state-specific program. And in California, that is the California DREAM Act application. All right, now we're going to go over some of the basics of student loan debt, or student loans, sorry. Next slide. We're going to start off with just going over a very broad level of what types of student loans are there. So there's two different types primarily. There's federal and private loans. And it's important that you know the difference because there's going to be a lot of different pathways when you're going through repayment, depending on the type of loan that you have. So federal loans, they're given to you on a needs base. They're subsidized and unsubsidized interests, but they have fixed interest rates. There are repayment plans, hardship deferment, loan forgiveness, and there's pathways for if you will have to rehabilitate any of your defaulted loans. On the other hand, if you have private student loans, that's given to you based on your credit history. Interest begins immediately. There's variable interest rates and no repayment plans or no hardship deferment. And if your loans are in default, you'll have to negotiate directly with your private lender. All right, and then there are three types of federal loans: direct, Perkins, and federal family education loans, or FEL loans. Direct loans are given by the government, federal government, which the money is funded by them as well. And all, pretty much nearly all newer federal student loans are direct loans, and they qualify for the most repayment programs and loan forgiveness options. If you have a Perkins loans, these are the federal loans that you are awarded by your university or education institution. The FEL loans are what most older federal loans were, and they were given by the federal government, but the money came from private banks. So if you have one of these older loans, you qualify for some, but much fewer federal programs. And keep in mind, you may have a mix of all three of these types of loans. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about who federal student loan servicers are, because you filled out the FAFSA, you took out your student loans, and then you're getting bills and payments bills from student loan servicers. So these are the companies that will be communicating with you when it's time to repay. And so they will also be responsible for applying payments to your account. They're going to be the ones that actually enroll you into income-driven repayment plans, deferment, forbearance, and any loan forgiveness. And they're the ones that, again, are going to be mailing you or sending you communications regarding your account and billing. So these are the folks that you want to know when it's time to repay, and they are servicing your student loan. On to the next slide. There's federal and private student loan servicers. So here are some brands to hopefully get you to recognize some of them. It's really common to have a mix of federal and private loans. So some of our federal servicers over here are Nelnet, Great Lakes. On the other hand, there's private servicers like Wells Fargo, Sallie Mae. And then also take note that some student loan servicers provide service for both federal and private loans. So that's like Navient, as you see here. All right, and so to help you get a good start on where your loans are or what kind of loans you have, you want to make sure that you go back to studentaid.gov. That should look familiar. That's where also where the FAFSA is. So again, get well acquainted with studentaid.gov. This is where all your federal loans will show up here. So you go ahead and log in or you create your account there. So anything that shows up on your account here, that's going to be a federal loan. If you get paperwork from another company that isn't showing up here, then chances are that that's a private student loan company. So make sure you're also going to studentaid.gov because there are many sites that imitate this federal website to gain your access to your personal information. And on the next slide, if you're trying to figure out how to get a hold of your private lenders, again, if you go on studentaid.gov and their name is not on there and you're still getting information from them about a loan that you have, that's probably a private student lender. And so most private loans do require a co-signer while federal loans do not. So that's a pretty good sign if you have a private loan. You can also review your credit report to confirm your loans as all loans are reported there. And the best way to get the most updated information on your private student loans is to stay on top of your service lender. So call your student loan servicer directly to get the most updated information on your account. And so that concludes the basics on student loans. And we'll be moving on to the next section of today's workshop with Cody. Cody, do we have you on the line?
You do. Thank you so much, Sam. Obviously paying for college is the first half of this crisis. If you're like me, if you are a first generation student, like, Sam, you mentioned you are as well. It's not often a choice. People still need student loans to afford the high cost of college no matter what. So anyone that's joined on, I see some folks talking about their current need for financial aid. We encourage you to look into all of the topics Sam just mentioned, but we understand if you still have to take out student loans, it's really not your fault. This is the system, the broken system that we have. So we're going to dive into the student loan section of the workshop. Before we get started with any of the repayment information, what we want to first address are the COVID-19 policy updates. There have been rapidly changing policies when it comes to student loans at the federal level, and we want to kind of get those out of the way because it can kind of confuse us during the rest of the conversation. So let's go to the next slide and let's get started with that part of the conversation. So at the beginning of this crisis in March, Congress temporarily suspended payments and waived interest for 6 months. So that meant that if you had a federally held student loan, that's a federal loan the Department of Education owns directly, you are eligible for this relief. If you're like me, I have one of these loans. That meant the relief started immediately. It was automatic. You didn't have to do anything about contacting your loan servicer or the Department of Ed. Now, the first thing that borrowers asked was, well, is this going to count towards federal programs that require that I make a certain amount of monthly payments? Those include public service loan forgiveness and loan rehabilitation. And the answer is yes. The suspension passed by Congress did count towards people's payment progress for some of these programs. I saw someone ask in the chat, and this is actually relevant to them. They were curious if the suspended payments during the pandemic counted as on-time payments, and they do. So the months that borrowers have had their payments and interest suspended, we're not going to impact your credit score or your repayment history. Now, I mentioned there are federal loans that are federally held. These are the ones that are owned by the Department of Education and automatically qualified for relief. But there are other federal student loans called Some of them are federal family education loans, and some are Perkins loans that are considered commercially held, meaning a bank owns these loans despite the fact that borrowers went to the Department of Education to access these loans. Those do not qualify. It's important that I note that for federal family education loans and Perkins loans, not all of them are commercially held and not all of them are federally held. So you may qualify for this relief having one of these types of loans, or you may not. It has been a confusing area for borrowers. So that meant that there was over 9 million federal loans that do not qualify for relief. That means 9 million Americans with student loans haven't received any relief at all during this pandemic. Now, other benefits that came with these policies, if you were in student loan default, there was a stoppage to involuntary collections. Borrowers who are in student loan default may have their wages garnished. They can have their tax and Social Security withheld. That's all been put on pause. Similarly, borrowers with student loans in default are going to see that their debt collections are on pause. So if you're receiving those pesky calls and harassing letters from a debt collection agency, that too has been put on pause during the pandemic. And for current students relevant to this workshop, if you had to take on a direct federal loan for your program, but were forced to withdraw from the program due to the crisis, you may be able to request that your direct loans are canceled by the Department of Education. Now, initially, Congress passed this relief and it was set for 6 months and set to expire in September. The president extended this pause on payments and interest, as well as the other benefits, until December 31st. Unfortunately, that means that millions of student loan borrowers are set to go back into repayment on January 1st, right after the holidays. It couldn't be a worse situation. But we need borrowers to be aware that right now the policy states that student loan payments on federally held student loans will resume on January 1st. Now, the extension still counted towards public service loan forgiveness and loan rehabilitation. If you are in a income-driven repayment plan during this time, any type of documentation or recertification has been pushed back. You are going to want to wait to hear from your student loan servicer about when to recertify again. And similarly, all of these involuntary collections like wage garnishment and Social Security withholding have been on pause until December 31st as well. So that is the crux of the COVID-19 policy updates. Stay tuned because this January 1st cliff, as we're calling it, is something that's extremely concerning to both advocates and lawmakers. And we are working diligently to try to extend that even further. Obviously, the pandemic is not even close to ending, and borrowers still need this type of relief. So that's the rapidly changing policies. Now we're going to get into what are the long-standing repayment options that existed prior to the pandemic and will exist after the pandemic as well. So first, we're going to go over the standard options, and we can go to the next slide here. So when a borrower leaves their school, and this, again, we're hosting a workshop for current students. When you leave your school, you graduated, you left with an unfinished program, whatever it may be, you have 6 months until you have to begin paying on your federal student loans. We call that a grace period. After that, a borrower is immediately entered into what is called the 10-year standard repayment. So that means a borrower has fixed monthly payments every month for a total of 10 years. And at the end, your loans are paid off. There may be more affordable options available to borrowers, and we're going to get into that in the next section about income-driven repayment plans. Before we do that, let's go over some of the other repayment options that exist for borrowers. It's good that you know about these options, but frankly, some of the best options we have are the income-driven repayment plans that are coming up in the next section. So be aware of these, but it may not be best for you if you're having trouble affording your payments. So there are these alternative options. One of them is called extended repayment. That's where you take your 10-year standard repayment and you extend it, to 20 years or so. So that means you pay longer, your monthly payments are lower, but because of the longer time frame, you may pay more in interest over the lifetime of the loan. There's another option, it's called graduated repayment. That's where your monthly payment starts at a lower amount, and every couple of years, your monthly payments increase. Now, the problem for that, for a lot of borrowers, is that you may start off at an affordable level, and if your payments increase, but your income doesn't increase, you may find yourself in a situation where you can't afford your monthly payments in the future. And lastly, there's extended graduated repayment. That's a combination of the two. So as I mentioned, there are these programs called income-driven repayment plans. These are the programs for long-term difficulty paying your loans, and we're going to touch on those momentarily. There are temporary options. If you find yourself in an emergency situation where you're going to have trouble paying off your affording your payments for a short-term period, you may be interested in a deferment or forbearance. Both of these temporary pause or lower your monthly payments. If you have a subsidized loan and you're in a deferment, you will have no interest accrued during the pause or lowering of your payments. In forbearance, interest always accrues. So you can see how if you put your payments on pause and your interest continues to accrue, it can actually add to the total of your loan. Now, the reason these are good for short-term emergencies is because there's a fixed timeline. You can only enroll in a deferment or a forbearance for a set period of time. So when you're thinking about a borrower who maybe has lower income or has a disability and cannot work, these may not be the best options for you, but you need to be aware of them because when you call your student loan servicing company, they're likely going to encourage you to enroll in one of these programs, even if it's not the best for your situation. A lot of borrowers ask us about loan consolidation. Loan consolidation is when a borrower takes multiple student loans and combines them into a brand new single loan. So if you have 10 student loans from college, you may have 10 individual payments. So it may be more convenient and more and less complicated if you combine your loans using a consolidation. Also, if you have a student loan that's an older type of federal family education loan, a Perkins loan, or possibly one of the Parent Plus loans that do not qualify for certain federal programs, then consolidation is another way to create a new loan. You would get one of the new direct consolidation loans that qualifies for all of the federal programs. Now, it's really important that you know about the consequences of loan consolidation. For one, you can only do this once. If you consolidate into the new direct consolidation loan, you can only do it once. Also, if you consolidate, any interest that accrued prior to that, it's added to your loan balance, so your loans may increase. And also, if you're making progress in any of the programs like public service loan forgiveness, by consolidating, you're creating a new loan, it restarts the clock. So I encourage anyone interested in consolidating to really read up on it at the Department of Education's website. Make sure you understand the consequences. Now, there's also options for people who are in student loan default. Default is when a borrower is 270 days past due. So that's 9 months behind on their payments. Now, you may find yourself 1 day past due on your loan. You forgot to make your payment. You're waiting for a check to clear, whatever. That's fine. You're considered delinquent, but there hasn't been any long-term consequences financially for you. When you hit 90 days past due, that is when your credit reporting agencies find out about this. And that can have long-term implications for your finances, for accessing loan, financial aid, whatever it may be. And then on 270 days, that's 9 months past due, that's when you're in default. And when that process completes, you can have fees added to your account. You can lose access to financial aid, so you can't complete your program. You can, in some states, previously, you could lose your license. There's punitive punishments for this. Default just comes with a slew of consequences. It's something we really work on making sure borrowers avoid. Now, not everyone can avoid it. So if you're in default and you have a federal student loan, it's important to know that there is a program eligible, helpful in helping you get back into good standing. That's called default loan rehabilitation. So in this program, a borrower agrees to make 9 payments within 10 months. And they agree to make payments at a level that's considered quote, reasonable and affordable. That is a level that's based on your income. And so it can be as little as $5 per month for a borrower with very low income. And similarly, this program can only be completed once. So we hear about a lot of borrowers who complete default rehab, and then they go back into their standard repayment and they fall into default again, and they have no option to get out. So a borrower that completes default rehabilitation will want to know immediately what their affordable federal programs are so that they can avoid defaulting again. Now, I've already teased it. I've talked a couple of times about the affordable programs. Here they are. Income-driven repayment plans are for people that are facing long-term difficulty affording their monthly payments. This is someone who maybe is a social worker and is underpaid, somebody who recently lost their job or has reduced hours due to the COVID-19 pandemic, whatever it may be. So we're going to dive into the programs. I'm going to address some online resources, and we'll talk about how to apply as well. So an income-driven repayment plan makes your monthly payments more affordable by calculating your monthly payment using a formula that's tied to what we call your discretionary income. Now, the formula is based on your income and your family size. I'm not going to go into the details here because it's complicated math. If you go to the Department of Education's website, it explains how they find that number. There's also a calculator there as well. So here's the programs. Leave it up to the government, unfortunately, to make this complicated. There's 5 repayment programs, and they all have different options available to them. So at the bottom of this chart, we have income contingent repayment. That is the oldest program, and you can see it's the least generous and the longest. So you pay on your monthly payments an amount that's equivalent to 20% of your discretionary income, and you can do this up to 25 years. At the end of 25 years, whatever's left in your loan balance is forgiven. As we work our way up to revised pay-as-you-earn, we're going through newer programs. Revised pay-as-you-earn and pay-as-you-earn are the newest programs introduced during the Obama administration. These are much more generous. You see the monthly payment amount is half, it's 10% discretionary income, and the time frame is 20 years. For revised pay-as-you-earn, if you have a graduate degree, it can be 25 years. But the time frame's lower, the monthly amounts are much lower as well. So the programs have been improved over time. And I say max time frame because a borrower recertifies every year. You apply, you're put in the program, and before the next year, you recertify, you're put in the program again, and you can do so for up to 20 or 25 years. So here's a quick example of how powerful these programs are. If you're a single borrower with one child and you have $37,000 in student loan debt, under the 10-year standard repayment plan, your monthly payment is $365. Now, in an income-driven repayment plan, your monthly payment could be as low as $0 if you make no income. At $25,000 in income, your payments are still under $50 a month. And you can still see here at $50,000 and $70,000 in yearly income, you still can receive significant savings on your monthly payments if you are enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. So enrolling in these programs is key. You have to submit an application to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan. You can get that application through your student loan servicer. You can go to the Department of Education's website as well. There's an online form, or you can print it out and mail it in also. Once you submit your application, it takes about 30 days to process. Once you're accepted, step 2, you're in your repayment plan. You're good to go. Now, you don't have to do anything if you don't need to for the next year. You're locked in at this monthly payment. But you need to put on your calendar that you need to recertify within the next year, because if you miss your recertification deadline, you'll be put back in the 10-year standard payment, so your monthly payments will increase, and you'll also see if there's any interest that accrued during that time added to your balance, so your loans could actually go up, unfortunately. So we always encourage borrowers at the 11th month, put that on your calendar so you get a reminder to recertify in time. If you forget, I've forgotten before, I'm an advocate, I've messed up. It's fine. You can still get back into the program. but we don't want you to face any of these extra costs for no reason. And lastly, one other note about that, it's important to note, yes, you can recertify at the 12th month, but a borrower can recertify their income at any time. So it's really important right now during the pandemic, if you recently lost your job or you have furloughed hours, you could change your monthly payment at any time by submitting proof of income to adjust your monthly payment. So a quick repayment plan checklist. Visit studentaid.gov, learn about the programs, do the calculations so you understand the options. Contact your loan servicer or visit the Department of Ed's website. That's where you can get the application. You can submit your application. Even online, it shouldn't take very long. It takes about 15, 20 minutes if you have all the paper or all the passwords and everything set up at the Department of Ed. And lastly, again, put it on your calendar, reapply next year, avoid any of those extra costs if you don't have to. So with that, let's take a quick break and address any of the questions from folks. I've seen some great ones already coming through. All right, this is a question from Diana. Natalia, this is a great one for you. Diana wants to know if you receiving a suspension of payments due to the COVID-19 pandemic, are those payments considered on time, or is it like you're falling behind on your account?
So that's a great question. Right now, if you are one of the majority of federal student loans that are included in the federal payment pause at 0% interest rate, then it is as if you are making on-time payments to repayment programs. And in terms of payments, you are not falling behind at all. It's just a pause. It's exactly what it said. So it's not like the word savings is the wrong word. It's a monthly benefit to you right now, but over all of that will be tacked on the back end, but it will be 0% interest and not be a capitalizing event. So this won't cost you any money, this payment pause, at all.
We get this question all the time from Dawn. Dawn wants to know if she completes an income-driven repayment program, will that forgiven amount be considered taxable income? So will she be hit with a tax bomb if she completes one of these IDR programs?
Cody, I'm happy to answer that question. And I just have to say, I'm so impressed by the fact that kids still in college are asking questions that I didn't even know the context around until I was probably in my 30s. So, just pat yourselves on the back for even being able to understand what that means. But the answer to your question is yes, on those income-driven repayment plans, after that 20 to 25 years, any of that loan amount forgiven is considered taxable income. Now I'm going to talk about in a second, public service loan forgiveness. That's one of the forgiveness programs. That forgiveness after that 10 years is not taxable income. That is forgiven tax-free. So it's just on those income-driven repayment plans. Back to you, Cody.
Thank you, Lindsay. That's definitely an important, detail that we need to be clear about. Let's see here. We've got a question in the chat box. Just a reminder to folks who are listening in, we are taking questions in the YouTube chat window, so feel free to add yours there. Diana wanted some clarity. There was a little confusion over the difference between an income-driven repayment plan and consolidation. These are very different things, but I know there's a lot of information on these workshops. So if Lindsay or Natalia, if you could clarify, I think that'd be helpful for Diana.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. So income-driven repayment plans are essentially repayment plans that instead of basing your monthly payment on your debt amount, they base it on your income. So you could have $500,000 in student loan debt, it wouldn't matter. That monthly payment is going to be based or capped at anywhere between 10 to 20% of your discretionary income. So that's really your gross income. So before taxes, all right? So there are a couple different types of income-driven repayment plans, things like income-based, income contingent, repay, pay. I wouldn't worry about too much about getting into the weeds on the differences around those programs. it's important to know that sort of income driven is the umbrella term, but essentially it helps to lower and minimize that monthly payment by basing it on your income. So, those are really powerful programs to take advantage of, especially when you are young, maybe new grads and your income is at its lowest. You're able to, minimize your monthly payment as much as possible and lock that in for 12 months. And, of course, your income might increase as you go on, but at least for those years in which, you had a lower income, you were able to take advantage of a lower monthly payment. And then consolidation is essentially a free federal process by which we are consolidating different federal loans together. And there are a couple of different reasons why you might want to consolidate your loans, whether it's sort of a get out of jail quick card for default, so it can get you out of default right away. You might need to do it in order to become eligible for some type of forgiveness program. If you have a certain type of loan, by consolidating, it's going to create a new direct consolidation loan that would then be eligible. Some people do it because they've got multiple servicers and maybe a lot of different loans, and it's going to just make things more manageable. Ultimately, that interest rate is becoming a weighted average of your interest rate, so it's not like refinancing. But hopefully that was a helpful explanation. I'll keep it there for now.
All right, one more question in this segment, and then we'll go forward. But I want to address a question from a current student. Frankly, guys, I'm happy to take this one because I learned it on an earlier workshop as part of the summit. But Tatiana wanted to know if she can have her financial aid adjusted during the year because the pandemic's impacted her income. Sam, I was part of the workshop earlier with the folks at the SBPC, the Student Borrower Protection Center, and learned a lot there. Tarek told us that you can ask to have your budget readjusted for financial aid. And so you can, speak with your financial aid office at your school to adjust any of the financial aid award letters that were given to you. So I just want to make sure, Tatiana, that you reach out to your financial aid office and make sure that you get in contact with the folks who can adjust that for you.
Yeah, Cody, I could jump in a little bit too. So if you
Awesome.
are, thanks. If you are filling out the FAFSA form again, and then it kind of spits out an expected family contribution number, if that expected family contribution number, or EFC, is a little outrageous, doesn't sound like it's something real for your family, there is a process to fix that. So if you go online again to where the FAFSA lives, there should be links there and information on how to appeal that decision so that you can get that adjusted to something that pretty much reflects what your family can actually afford.
Great. With that, let's put a pause on questions. If folks have any more questions, please put it in the chat window here on YouTube. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Lindsay, who can take us through public service loan forgiveness and some other resources for borrowers.
Great. Thanks, Cody. So we're going to talk about some of the federal loan forgiveness programs that are out there. We're going to touch briefly on teacher loan forgiveness, a forgiveness program specifically for K through 12 teachers a little bit later on. But really, we're going to focus in on the biggest forgiveness program out there, public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF, as I'll refer to it from here on out. We're going to walk you through sort of what that application process looks like, what you would need to do in order to become eligible. Just as a heads up, this program has sort of become notorious because so many borrowers have been rejected and found it almost near impossible to actually achieve that forgiveness. So I'm going to talk about why that's the case and how, for you all, if you're interested in taking advantage of something like that, you can set yourselves up for success. So moving on to the next screen. One of the most important aspects around forgiveness programs, particularly one like public service loan forgiveness, is the fact that in order to get the maximum benefit from that forgiveness, you're going to want to make sure that you're combining it with a repayment program that is going to minimize that monthly payment. So there's no need for you to be paying any more each month on those student loans than you absolutely need to. And the only repayment plan that's going to help you to do that is an income-driven repayment plan. So they're a powerful tool to help keep that monthly payment really, really low. And then when paired with a program like public service loan forgiveness, what that ends up doing is that's sort of the optimal benefit there. You're able to minimize that monthly payment and then maximize that ultimate forgiveness at the very end. So sort of that theory around forgiveness is one just to keep in mind as we go through this. So public service loan forgiveness. So the gist with this program is that after you have made 120 qualifying payments on your student loans, okay, so that's about 10 years, these payments do not need to be consecutive. They just need to be cumulative. In fact, most borrowers, don't do it in 10 years straight. Sometimes they take a break. Maybe they go work in the private sector and come back. But you just need sort of 120 total on those payments. Working for a qualifying public service employer, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that is, you're eligible to have the remainder of your loan balance forgiven tax-free. All right. So I know it sounds pretty great, and it is, and it's a great benefit for those who are in the public service, whether that be nurses, teachers, et cetera, government work. Like I said, we'll talk about what exactly qualifies. This program started in October of 2007. So anything from 2007 to present would be sort of fair game as far as payments and service goes. So it is retroactive if you're just finding out about it now, and say you've been working and making payments for a while. All right. So moving on to the next screen, this is sort of a great visual on what exactly you're going to need to do, sort of a diagnostic assessment in order to be eligible for this program. So first and foremost, you must have a certain type of loan, and that loan is a direct loan. You must have a direct loan in order to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So for the majority of borrowers who took out loans from 2010 to present, which would hopefully be most of you, you're pretty much in the clear. There's a good chance that you have direct loans already. All right. So you can check that box. Next, you want to make sure your employer qualifies. Okay. And there are a couple different ways you can check this, whether the IRS website online, but essentially qualifying employers include, like I said, any type of government institution, federal, state, local, or tribal, non-for-profit 501c3s, and a couple of others that, I can show you even later on how the Savi tool can help you to identify those and confirm their eligibility. But once that's confirmed, you're good to go. All right, so you need to have the right loan type, a direct loan. You obviously need to work for a qualifying employer. And then last but not least, you need to be making those payments in a qualifying repayment plan. And the qualifying repayment plan is an income-driven repayment plan. All right, doesn't matter which type of IDR, but you need to be on one of those income-driven plans. So those three things simultaneously, and you need to sort of make 120 of those in order to be eligible. Now, how do you track those credits year over year, right? Well, you submit what's called an employment certification form, and you do this annually. And what this form does is it essentially gets signed off by the borrower, and then it gets signed off by that borrower's employer. They certify that they, actually worked there from those dates, and then it goes to the servicer, and the servicer basically looks back and is able to certify those 12 months from the year end worth of credits. And essentially, you repeat this process year over year for those 10 years. So 12 credits and 12 credits closer and closer to that 120, you're inching until you reach that 120 at the very, very end. And once you get there, that's when you would submit the actual PSLF application, which basically looks identical to the employment certification form. It's almost like the last employment certification form in the process. And that's when you'd be eligible to receive that forgiveness. So that's essentially what is required. There's sort of those three things that you need to do in order to be eligible: your loan type, your repayment plan, and your employer. And then, like I said, the way to sort of make sure you get past that finish line at the end is by submitting those forms and tracking those credits year over year. So we move to the next screen. We'll take a deeper look into exactly what qualifies for PSLF as far as loan type, employers, and repayment plans. So as far as loans, I'd mentioned direct loans. So this includes your subsidized and unsubsidized, Grad Plus, Parent Plus, and direct consolidated loans, okay? As far as employer goes, all levels of government, okay? Federal, state, local, or tribal, 501c3 nonprofits, and as I mentioned, any sort of other critical public service areas, and those, can differ, but, we can help you to figure out if you think you might be eligible under those. Last but not least, repayment plans. So I'd mentioned income-driven repayment plans. You can also be eligible under the 10-year standard repayment plan, and that's with a separate program we're going to talk about in a second, but really you want to focus on those income-driven repayment plans. So that's what does qualify for PSLF. Let's look at what doesn't qualify for PSLF on the next screen. So The loans that don't qualify are those older FFEL loans, those federal family education loans. Perkins loans also don't qualify. Loans in default and any private student loans. Now, for those top loans, those FFEL loans that don't qualify, they can become eligible through consolidation. As I mentioned, consolidation, one of the reasons why you would want to consolidate is to make a loan eligible for a forgiveness program. And that is exactly that case. All right, so it can become eligible, but you would only be able to start accumulating credits after that point of consolidation. As far as employers that don't qualify, so government contractors, this was one that often trips people up. If you work for the government, that's fine, but if you are a government contractor, that does not qualify. Labor unions also do not qualify. 501c4 nonprofits and political groups, as well as any religious instruction that does not qualify. And last but not least, let's look at repayment plans. These are the repayment plans that do not qualify for PSLF. So that includes the extended, graduated, extended graduated. And if you are in a deferment, forbearance, or default, that period of time does not count. So I will say one thing I see this all the time, is borrowers who are not able to make their payments because maybe their income is decreased. And so they call their servicer and go right into a deferment or forbearance. When in fact, they could get onto an income-driven repayment plan. And by doing that and getting that sort of on a low monthly payment, the difference is one of those they're going to be able to accumulate credits towards PSLF, and the other they're not. So sort of making sure you're optimizing your situation so that you can continue to accumulate credits and take advantage of as many of those months as possible. Not sacrificing any that you could have gotten closer. So moving forward, I want to talk about a newer program that was introduced in the last couple of years to actually expand the public service loan forgiveness program. It's called Temporary Expanded PSLF, or TEPSLF. And it was essentially created and introduced to address many of the concerns that borrowers had or that happened around the rollout of public service loan forgiveness. I mentioned earlier on, this program started in 2007. In 2017, about 10 years later, when the first wave of applicants applied, a little over 100,000 people, less than 1% were accepted. And the reason why was because many of them had no idea about needing a certain loan type or repayment plan, these sort of, little technicalities, you could say, that they were unaware of. And so what this sort of expansion does is it allows for borrowers who were previously rejected to actually now get that forgiveness. So for those borrowers who are interested in TEPSLF, it's essentially all of the PSLF requirements that you meet, but you just weren't on the right repayment plan. So you made your 120 payments, you had direct loans, you worked for a qualifying employer, but you just didn't have an income-driven plan. So the process around this is you actually have to get rejected from PSLF first in order to then escalate your application and apply for this program. And it's a limited time fund that Congress appropriated. So when that runs out, it's out. But this is helping borrowers who, for lack of a better term, were sort of screwed over by this PSLF process. And I think it's a sign in the right direction of trying to make sure that they're doing better by the borrower with this program. All right, moving on to some other forgiveness programs that are available. So total and permanent disability discharge. If you become disabled, you're able to have your loans discharged. False certification of eligibility. So basically, you might be eligible for discharge of your federal student loans if your school falsely certifies your eligibility to receive a loan. I always think that one's interesting. Closed school discharge. So if your school closes while you're enrolled or soon after you withdraw, you actually might be eligible for discharge of those loans. This is a sort of a morbid one, but discharge due to death. So yes, if you die, your loans will be discharged. Or if the student, whose parents had a PLUS loan taken out on their behalf, if they died, that will also be forgiven, or not forgiven, but discharged. Borrower defense to repayment. So you may be eligible for discharge if you took out a loan to attend a school and the school either did something or failed to do something related to your loan or to sort of the educational services that the loan was intended to pay for. So it's sort of a very vague, and there's a lot of ambiguity there. And this has been something that's sort of been hotly contested under the DeVos Department of Education, but that is eligible potentially to be discharged. And then last but not least, you have teacher loan forgiveness. And if you essentially teach basically 5 consecutive years full-time at a low-income elementary and secondary school or an educational service agency, you may be eligible for up to $17,500 in forgiveness. And so that's just for teachers. All right, so last but not least on these forgiveness programs, here's a basic checklist of things you can do right now to sort of track your progress. So always visiting studentaid.gov, where you can access those resources and these applications like that employment certification form. You want to verify your employer qualifies first and keep that documentation year over year. You want to make sure you enroll in a qualifying repayment plan, which is that income-driven repayment plan, and then continue to work full-time and complete those 120 payments as you go. And that is essentially the loan forgiveness sort of wrap up. Moving on to the next section. So I want to talk about Savi's online enrollment tool and sort of the services that we provide borrowers to basically help make this process easier. And by that, I mean, it's been great that we get to sort of, tell you these things and you can sort of learn and understand how these programs work, but actually getting enrolled and seeing that savings and getting from start to finish, that's where we sort of help borrowers to really cross that finish line. So the Savi sort of tool, if we go on to the next slide, essentially helps borrowers to, we'll go in this one. Actually, can you go to the next slide? Perfect. So the Savi tool helps borrowers to check their eligibility around all of those forgiveness programs, as well as repayment, all the different types of income-driven repayment plans. So we ask you questions around your tax filing status, your income, your employment, and that's all so that we can identify exactly what you might be eligible for and the sort of optimal repayment plan for you. You can then go and select that repayment plan, the one that looks the best to you, maybe the lowest payment. And then we digitize all of the enrollment paperwork, all of those forms, and submit it to your servicer on your behalf. And so we have a 99% acceptance rate on those. It sort of eliminates all the human error. And we make sure to monitor those applications and stay on the servicer until they're accepted. So on the tool itself, if we look forward, great. So this is a look at the results page when a borrower has gone through the process and sees a personalized repayment and forgiveness plan. So they're able to see, by enrolling in the pay plan, PAYE, a type of income-driven plan, how much they could lower that monthly payment, that monthly savings of around $350, and even their projected forgiveness. It expands for more information, and they're able to sort of select and enroll from there. Moving on to the next screen. And great, I'm going to turn it over to Natalia, who's going to talk about how you can take some action today.
Lindsay, I'm going to jump in and take those for you.
Okay.
Me and Natalia and the whole Student Debt Crisis team, along with millions of supporters, have really been working on taking really important actions, particularly right now when the COVID-19 pandemic has really been just a crushing blow to borrowers that were already hurt by the student debt crisis. So let's go to the next slide and talk about some of the actions and ways that we're getting involved right now. So first, as I mentioned earlier, there is this repayment cliff. On January 1st, student loan borrowers are expected to return to payments. I wish we could say that the president who extended relief was still thinking and caring about student loan borrowers, but I'm not sure that's the case. So with that in mind, the only avenue we have to make sure that our payment pause is extended and that borrowers don't hit this cliff is through Congress. And so we have been part of a group of organizations that have been really messaging, talking to lawmakers and communicating publicly with press and online about the need to extend this repayment cliff. If you agree, if you're one of those borrowers that has a pause in payments right now and can't imagine making payments on January 1st, your legislators need to hear from you. So we encourage everyone, call your senators, call your Congress member, write them, whatever you can, even go on Twitter if it's easier for you, and tag them and just scream about this. It's really important, and we can't just have our government fail us during the holidays, during this pandemic. It's just really immoral. And on the next slide, you probably have been seeing everywhere, including online, but this movement to cancel student debt has really picked up steam. We are one of the organizations in a coalition of over 230 groups that have been calling on Joe Biden and the next administration to cancel student debt on day one. The president has the power to do that. They can use an executive action to direct the Department of Education to cancel student debt. So we are really, really, really pushing hard on this, and it's gained some steam. And so what will that do? That will provide relief for individuals and families during the pandemic. It'll stimulate the economy as a whole. You know, we are facing a pandemic recession, and things are not looking good for the economy across the country. Student debt cancellation is proven to boost GDP and can add jobs to the economy as well. This is what much needed relief. And lastly, you know, the whole country this year has been faced with the history of systemic racism. Student debt cancellation is shown to reduce the racial wealth gap, to address inequities in our higher education system and the outcomes of higher education. For these three reasons and many others, we want you to support the cancellation movement. Excuse me. As I mentioned, we joined NAACP, a handful of labor unions, civil rights, consumer rights, student groups, all in this huge coalition calling on Joe Biden to cancel student debt. We sent a letter to the future administration this week. It was covered in the press. This is a big story right now. And we have a petition. You know, this is the heart of what Student Debt Crisis does. Our petition right now has actually over 136,000 signatures. It's exponentially growing every day. And, you know, the text is simple. We're urging Joe Biden to use his action, his authority to just cancel student debt on day one. If you are one of these people, please join us on Move On. We are really organizing a large movement. And the last thing we could do is share our stories. Right now, because this movement is growing, we really need to build a narrative about what this would mean for people. You know, what does a future without student debt look like? And so people are going online, they're telling us about their stories, they're using hashtag #CancelStudentDebt, and we're really putting a human and individual face to this. It's not just an economic issue, it's not just finances, these are people's lives, these are our friends and neighbors. So if you're comfortable, share your student debt story online and use hashtag #CancelStudentDebt. So this may be one of the few workshops where we've actually addressed nearly all the questions. So I think we only have one or two left. And so let's see here. Okay, I've got a question from a borrower. You know, Lindsay, this is probably a good one for you and your team because it's related to IDR. A borrower wants to know if you are enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan and you just lost your job. Just a reminder, what do you need to do to have your payments lowered?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you lost your job and have no income, you basically just need to submit that IDR plan as soon as possible. There's no supporting documentation that you're required to attach. You just submit the application to your servicer, and you will be eligible to sort of get enrolled in a $0 monthly payment and lock that in for 12 months. So it doesn't matter, you could get a job next week. If you've already submitted that application and locked that in, you're able to take advantage of that situation. So there's no other supporting documentation you need, just get that application in.
All right, and one more question. Natalia, this is a good one for you because we've been working on this, but I've seen people throughout today ask us, you know, what is the reality when it comes to student debt cancellation? Is this really on the horizon? How optimistic should borrowers be about this?
So that's a great question. And thank you all for being on with us this evening. You know, I've been working in student loan debt policy and on the student debt crisis for nearly a decade now. And I will say that this is by far the most amount of energy I've seen. As you know, I think you saw there's over 224 organizations that are supporting debt cancellation, but it's not just from the nonprofit organizations and labor organizations and policy groups, it's also from our lawmakers on Capitol Hill. We see with the Warren Schumer amendment that they are saying to cancel up to $50,000 in student loan debt. We saw various bills through Congress, didn't get passed, but put into Congress that talked about debt cancellation. So I've never seen this type of energy, and I know that we're going to be able to take it over the finish line, but we need to do it with the public support and with the support of everyone on this meeting and everyone out there. So I think what you were talking about, Cody, is really important. Yes, tweet, hashtag cancel student debt, but also make sure to contact all of your lawmakers and your state officials and share your stories.
All right, that was the last question for the evening. Another great student loan workshop is on the books. Thank you everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.